Designcast Podcast, the podcast for design and STEAM educators.
Hello and welcome to Designcast, a podcast where I interview a wide range of excellent guests in design and STEAM education to get their unique perspectives. My name is Jason Reagan, and I use my 20 plus years of experience as a design educator to dig deep into complex issues. This podcast has one simple mission: to create a community of people around the world that are interested in design and STEAM education. Each episode, I chat with guests from all corners of the design world, from classroom teachers to authors and even to educational consultants. We discuss a wide range of topics that we feel are relevant today. I do want to ask you that if you're enjoying this podcast, please leave a review, rate, subscribe, share, or download from your favorite podcasting app. This helps the podcast get discovered by listeners that might not find it otherwise. Also, it helps me to continually define the direction of future guests and episodes. Feel free to drop by my website, www.jasonreagan.ga, to leave me a comment or to sign up to be considered as a future guest on future episodes. Also, don't forget to stop by Anchor and leave me a voice clip that could even end up in an upcoming show. Thanks for listening, so let's get to it. For this episode of Designcast, I had the privilege to speak with Lisa Blank. Lisa is the director of STEM programs at Watertown City School District in upstate New York. She is also a lead STEAM fellow and a member of the advisory council for STEM learning ecosystems and a regional co-chair for her local ecosystem, which we'll talk about what that means in the episode. We had a great conversation about what it takes to implement a STEM program culture across multiple buildings and levels. There is something for everyone in this episode. The links that Lisa shares are also included in the show notes, so be sure to check those out and to connect with Lisa on the social media platform of your choice. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy this chat with Lisa Blank. Welcome back to another episode of Designcast. And on this episode of Designcast, I have Lisa Blank with me. Lisa, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well, Jason. It's great to be here with you. It's an honor to be part of your podcast.
The honor is all mine. I am so excited to chat with you, and you have such great things to share. So, Lisa, if you don't mind, could you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and how you became involved in education?
Well, it's kind of a long story. I'm the director of STEM programs for Watertown City School District, and I work with students in a pre-K-12 setting, nearly 4,000 students there. I'm also very involved with STEM learning ecosystems, and I work with educators across the northern stretch of New York. And by northern stretch of New York, I mean Adirondack Park is in the middle of it. It's very vast, geographically isolated, and not at all what people think of when they think of New York. Because I know growing up in the Minneapolis-St. Paul region myself, I thought of New York City whenever I thought New York. I live in a very rural area, just 4 miles from the border with Canada. I've been here for about 20 years. Prior to this, I lived and taught in southern New Hampshire, and I grew up on a farm in Wisconsin and began my teaching career in Red Wing, Minnesota. So it was my husband's career as an air traffic controller that really brought us to Fort Drum, and that is an Army post very near to where I live and teach. It was this move that kind of opened the door for me to have horses again, which is something that I was very active as a young child and teenager. I used to ride and show horses a lot. So here I am with my horses, and I'm in rural northern New York, and I have been very active in advocating for STEM education. I never saw myself as being an educator when I was a child or teenager, and probably the reason for that was because my mother was a teacher. I saw the hours she worked. I saw the, relatively low pay for the amount of work that was being done. And I didn't think that was for me. I was always very, very curious about my world. And I guess I'm thankful that that hasn't been kind of worked out of me. And I think that drives my continued passion for STEM education. What happened in my college experience was, as a chemistry major, I had been asked to tutor a group of nursing students who I had worked with, as a lab assistant, helping them, with their laboratory work. And I really loved it. I loved helping those students succeed at the work that they needed to do. They were nervous, fearing that, they weren't going to be able to successfully complete the nursing program that they were in, which was a nursing program with the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. I was able to help them, and I found great joy in being able to use my knowledge of science to help make the concrete, or help make the abstract content of chemistry more concrete to those nursing students. So that's really what put me into education. I've had experiences in suburban and rural schools, and now that I'm in, this rural isolated area of northern New York, I saw a real need for advocating for better access to supplies, equipment, professional learning opportunities, to support all the areas of STEM education. So hopefully that kind of answers a little bit about my background. It's kind of different, I guess, than what might be a typical path into STEM education.
I agree. And thank you for sharing that with me. And I will say that one trend I've noticed in the time I've been doing these interviews is that for particular reasons, design educators, STEM educators, STEAM educators, they often have a really winding path with lots of hairpin turns that get them to where they are. Unlike in many cases, an English teacher, for example, they knew that all along that they wanted to be an English teacher, And so I think the life experiences that most STEM teachers have really helps to grow those experiences in their students. It's great that you've had all those experiences. And so I have to ask, how many horses do you have now?
Yeah, so I do have a small farm, very rural. I've got, I really enjoy it.
Sure.
I guess during this time of the pandemic,
wow.
be able to go and have that space and spend time in the great outdoors with my horses and dogs and stuff, it brings peace.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of people have kind of gotten back to the simpler things in life during this time in the last 12 months or so. And so it's great that you've had that. And so tell me, you mentioned that I have something written down here that you shared with me, that you are the lead STEAM fellow and member of the Advisory Council for STEM Learning Ecosystems and a regional co-chair for my local ecosystem. What is an ecosystem?
Well, as we think about, the community that you develop for STEM, I've listened to your podcast with Liz Gallo and Fee Morrison, and I've been thinking about this, the need for community. People by nature need this community to work with, to share ideas, to learn and grow together, right? So STEM Learning Ecosystems is an international organization. There are 96 ecosystems that are formal ecosystems currently with this organization. And what it does is it creates this community of practice. It brings it together, business and industry, nonprofits, out-of-school programs, K-12 educators, colleges and universities, all to kind of struggle with this problem of STEM education. How do we get consistent, equitable experiences in STEM learning to our students across the globe? How do we create those career pathways and pipelines so that we have a well-trained, skilled workforce to solve the big problems now and into the future? And how can we partner with the various sectors that might come together to support STEM education? So we get into some advocacy, some partnerships with business and industry, supporting activities in the schools, and then opportunities via internships and such to, support that career-focused pathway development. So STEM Ecosystems looks at bringing together thought leaders to kind of navigate that process of creating a STEM focus in our learning for all. It's not just K-12, it's really for all, so that we have that skilled workforce maybe as an ultimate goal. But I would argue that I just want people to be curious and enjoy life as well. And I feel like without curiosity and that need and desire to explore one's world, I think life gets a little dull. So I think it's more than just a career focus. So Lead STEM Fellows, that is a leadership program through STEM Learning Ecosystems. I, along with about 20 other leaders in STEM, gathered together over just over a year in really honing our leadership skills and thinking about how we were going to work to influence the STEM learning landscape. STEM Ecosystems has done 2 leadership cohorts, so they have 40 to 50, I don't know the exact number, of Lead STEM fellows that have gone through this training program. And it's pretty intense. You really think about the impact you have on others and how to help, move STEM education forward, not just in some areas. Like some areas seem to have a lot of business and industry that are really supporting this, but we're really looking at trying to make it equitable for all. My region, New York, is split into economic development zones as a state. And I think a lot of states probably operate that way. And I know that in New York, at least, so they're gathering a lot of data and helping to support the local business community. Economic development zones kind of track economic progress. They help provide some workforce training. So in New York, these economic development zones also have become STEM hubs, so to speak, where we come together in these regions to promote STEM education and work on developing those partnerships with business and industry to, help move STEM education forward. So, for example, in New York, Siemens Corporation has been very influential in supporting like some of the robotics activities and the technology classroom activities in my region. Does that sort of explain it?
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I know that it wasn't necessarily a question that we probably planned to ask, but when I saw that, I was like, I need to know more about this. And so these ecosystems, are they based all in America, or are they global, or do you know? Like,
no, we have Mexico, Israel. I'm trying to think. I know where it might be Kenya. I have to look. If you go to stemecosystems.org, they actually have a map that shows, has dots and shows where all these ecosystems are located. Oh, one of my good friends is in British Columbia, so we have Canada as well.
Okay. Yeah, because I think people listening might be that you can gain some more locations through this.
It's just that need for community is huge, and people want to, I think, people want to be able to help. One of the things that really struck me is at the start of the pandemic, people normally, when there's a crisis, they want to help others. So they struggled with it. People struggled with the idea, I can't go out and help others like I normally would, because we were all kind of shut down and closed in. And I wonder if in some respects that hasn't helped to kind of forge the strength of, say, the Twitter community and others, where people want to come together and, well, we maybe can't solve the COVID problem, but we can certainly work on solving some other problems collaboratively in this online environment while we're isolated at home.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. That sounds amazing. When we hang up, I'm going to be checking that out. I'll make sure to include that in the show notes as well, because I'm sure that people will be really curious, because any community like that's online, people want to know about it.
Well, STEM ecosystems, one of the things that's been tough, though, is we generally would have a couple of in-person convenings each year, and we too have been held back from being able to do that. In our convenings, we don't call them conferences, we call them convenings or communities of practice, because it's really about bringing in your challenges, bringing in your ideas about how we can work together to solve these problems. And what can we learn from others in the community? I've
just pulled up the website, and I cannot wait to dig into it, because that looks like it's something I definitely want to be a part of, or at least, review and see what we can do to kind of bring even more resources into the fold, so to speak. I'm excited to read about that. And so I hate to shift gears, but I'm going to do it. Just thinking back now to the situation you're in, you are a district level leader. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so can you give me sort of just an overview of your district and what that looks like for STEM?
So it's an interesting challenge. I'm in a district that has 8 buildings. We've got 4 elementary schools, an intermediate school, which is 5-6, a middle school, which is 7-8, and a high school, which is 9-12. And in the schools, the principals really drive what goes on in those schools. So a challenge for me coming into this setting nearly 6 years ago was that most of the school leaders really didn't have much knowledge as to what STEM is. One of them has, a fair amount of technology knowledge and has some savvy there. But, I started thinking that I was going to help, everybody in the community understand what STEM was. And I thought that being able to influence other school leaders would be, probably a good way to go about getting that. But I found that, I wasn't in charge of them. They weren't in charge of me. So I'm kind of off here in my own world. And they're kind of like, what is that? What is STEM? And meanwhile, they're so caught up in the management responsibilities that they kind of lose sight of anything other than what they have to comply with. We become a very compliance-driven structure. New York is a very test-driven state. If it's not tested, it's not deemed as being nearly so important, and that makes things really tough. So what I've found to be really successful is in creating those STEM opportunities for the young kids, reaching our elementary schools with STEM camps, clubs, visits to the classroom, being present with, bringing high school clubs even to like the technology class, bringing them to science fairs or STEAM fairs in the elementary buildings so the parents can see some of these things that we do with STEM, and then they start demanding it. So we actually have created a culture, and this sounds sort of backwards maybe, but our elementary kids have had more experiences with robotics and coding in many cases than our middle school kids. So now middle school parents start demanding it. Principals start saying, wait a minute, we've got to do something here because these kids are coming in with more knowledge than what we have to offer. So it's kind of a bottom-up strategy in terms of influencing the culture, and it's working. I hadn't necessarily envisioned it going that way. My last building to really come online with a makerspace, we have makerspaces in all 8 of our buildings, really was our high school. And it took a while to really find that person who was passionate to move it forward, and it is in our library because that's the most accessible location. But we get so caught up in what we have to do that sometimes it's hard for people to see where this fits. So now doors have been opened for people to start understanding that STEM isn't just science, technology, engineering, and math. It's an overlap of those concepts with other disciplines, in a transdisciplinary setting. So we have social studies teachers, English teachers, etc., coming into the library to do 3D design and 3D printing projects, some doing sewing projects, vinyl cutting, etc. But it's really interesting that it took a bottom-up approach as opposed to that top-down approach. And I guess we all know that works better in some respects, but I was really surprised at the resistance to it at the leadership level.
Well, several episodes ago, I had someone on that said when it comes to change, it's not the change they're afraid of, it's the loss. And I think in many cases, people think if you're doing this, that means you're going to lose that. I think that you're absolutely right. It actually makes sense because often elementary school or primary age school teachers have a bit more breadth and bandwidth, and kids are more creative then. We really school the creativity out of kids by the time they hit high school. So it does make sense when you talk about it, right?
Right. One of the problems that we have is this concept of seat time. And we do have creative teachers at the elementary school who understand that, I can infuse some algorithmic thinking, some coding in with this kindergarten animals project that I'm working on. So the kids are doing reading and they're doing science and they're doing some computer science, at least, the thinking in an unplugged sense. So I think the fact that they are contained in a classroom where all the disciplines can easily fuse together, I think it makes sense that it's easier there. Sometimes I feel like in the older grades, we get so stuck in our silos that it almost becomes a rut. We think, got this curriculum map, I need to cover all these things. And people fail to see that you could make deeper, better connections and have kids so much more excited about their learning if you take the time to think creatively about how do I weave this in with other content that's meaningful and relevant to my students.
Thank you for sharing that. And it sounds to me like you've got this district-wide approach, which is a little surprising, but it's working to start from the bottom. So how have you had help in implementing this? What sorts of things have helped you? Have there been members of the community? Have there been organizations? What has helped you in the implementation of this?
So one of the things I really have to say has been a huge help to me has been our technology integration specialists in the district. They have been they've been right in there with me. I go into classrooms sometimes and work with teachers and students directly. Some of the concepts that we teach or some of the activities we do are not necessarily easy for teachers to take on by themselves. So we'll do professional, learning and professional development on robotics, for example. That doesn't mean a teacher, even if they've done a couple of days of training, feels comfortable going and doing that activity with their kids. So we're there with them, like an infused coaching kind of model. And I've found that to be extremely effective because once you go through, a couple times going in, working with the teacher and the students, they kind of let go of that idea that they need to be the experts. And they see that, sometimes if you let go and let kids do, you'll be amazed at the result. And that's a very different approach that makes a lot of teachers uncomfortable. But I found the best results come when teachers kind of let go and they accept that in some of these newer technologies, I'm going to be learning alongside the kids. And you know what? That's okay. It's fun. And I find that they find a lot of joy in learning when they accept that. So that's been really, the coaching piece has been really huge. Other things I would have to say, the STEM ecosystems and my Twitter and LinkedIn crowds have been, the people that I gather with there. So many ideas and resources, even just the short posts sometimes are enough to give you an idea of another approach you might take. Maybe it's the thing that uplifts you that day when you're frustrated because you're hitting resistance and it keeps you going. But all those little connections matter a lot. And I would also say that within the community, the business industry ecosystem partners have been helpful too. So our local Chamber of Commerce, one of the leaders said, "Hey, Lisa, I'd like you to come speak with the Chamber about what's going on with computer science in the district because we need, we're concerned. We've had employers say they need more, basic coding skills in employees." So that knowledge of that alone kind of has other leaders, take notice that, hey, this is an area we really do need to pay attention to because our community needs it. And I would also say then that the support to programming, like experts coming in for project-based learning activities, to serve on a panel, to discuss issues with kids, to be interviewed regarding, maybe some of the expertise that's needed. Our students did a playground design project, and so they needed to speak with local coding officers and, a variety of people from our community. They're eager and willing to come in and support the activities that we do. So I'm thankful for all of that too.
It behooves the local community to be involved, because these are going to be their future constituents or even employees or managers or employers, so it really makes sense for them to help shape who those kids are going to be and who they're going to become. And so I think it's great. And I think hopefully as we emerge from a post-COVID situation, this will be time to really rebuild the community ties and hopefully in a different way and hopefully in a more enriching way. But let's see, let's hope that comes through.
One of the things I noted, as I listened to the other podcasts and thought about people who I've seen be very effective with STEM is a lot of them are connectors. They're linking people together to help get the work done. So I think that idea of forming and forging those connections, work between school and community, are just so important.
I could not agree more. And I actually revived this podcast for that very reason, was to help hopefully continue the conversation while there was not the ability to do that in person. And so let's hope. And it's been great. It's been great to talk to people. I've had access to people who I probably would not have been able to have conversations with very easily without this certain situation that we're in. And so you mentioned before, Lisa, that you've had some challenges with some of the, you're in a public school system, so there's always the demands of the red tape and whatnot. So what are some of those challenges? You mentioned standardized testing, but what are some of the other things you've kind of had struggles with and challenges?
Well, I think that one of the other things is when you come in a grant funded position, which my position generally has been, we receive Department of Defense educational activity grant funding to support our STEM programming. Without it, we wouldn't have nearly the amount of STEM integration going on, across our buildings and really across the region because other schools are impacted by it as well. There's kind of a feeling, though, that grants are temporary. So I think that also has been maybe a bit of a stumbling point in being taken seriously in this role is that, well, what are you going to do after 5 years when the grant's up? And what they don't realize is that the support for this is continuing and growing. And I think that it's just a matter of time before maybe it becomes more commonly supported in districts as a common leadership position. Really, it's kind of a branch of the curriculum and instruction leadership at the district level. So that probably is the biggest challenge. Another one is just the equity. Right now, I have teachers who are ready and eager. There is no mandate to do this. I've kind of made the inroads where I can, and that pool of educators has grown tremendously. They see the benefits. When you see the kids light up and really get engaged in learning, solve tough problems because they're enjoying what they're doing, when that child or those children may have previously been kind of disengaged and disconnected, it's a game changer. So the teachers that take the risk, engage in the activities, put in the time, they see the benefits and they keep going. So we are expanding, but it does trouble me that we have students who may not have the rich STEM experiences that the experiences you get right now kind of depend upon the comfort level of the teacher. We really want to change that, and I'm working with a colleague of mine to really make a grade level approach. So at third grade, we're going to hit all the classrooms. They're at least going to have these experiences so that we can start to, I hate to say standardize, but at least make it known that all students in this grade level will experience this by the end of the year. Maybe some basic robotics and some coding. And we haven't defined exactly what that will be because up to now, it's been very much dependent upon the teacher's interests, willingness, and connections to other curriculum areas.
So instead of the word standardized, maybe we can call it essential agreements,
Yes.
essential understandings, because I understand your apprehension to use that word. But
yes, it's like,
yeah.
But I do want to have some consistency. Maybe consistency is a better word because I think the equity in access is of great concern to me. One thing I have to say with robotics, it's been amazing to me. So you bring in these kits of, hundreds of parts and students have to build their own robots. I find that most of the time, the vast majority of the time, are students who are the quickest to grasp that challenging content with building, designing, and even programming are students who are not doing well academically in school. Students who have kind of been cast aside, I wouldn't say given up on, but they've been identified as having special learning needs, right? They're rock stars when it comes to robotics.
Of course.
In many, many cases. And it's just a matter, we need to meet kids where they are and make the learning experience valuable to them.
I could not agree with you more. I think everyone listening would be like, I completely agree with you. No, I think we all do. I completely agree with you. And I don't think it's us that needs to be convinced. But I tell you, that sounds really, really like your movie. It sounds like there's movement, which is better than some places.
Yes.
And, of course, we can always have more movement, but it sounds like there is a momentum that's gaining. So that segues me to the next question, which is, what is your vision? What would you like to see happen in 2, 5, 10 years down the road?
Well, one of the things I'd really like to see is to get rid of this concept of seat time and to think about STEM in a transdisciplinary sense. I'd like to see a lot of the learning. I know it's challenging with a lot has to be reconfigured for this to happen. I'd like students to be solving rich problems that matter to them, maybe local community problems in a project-based learning environment, and be learning the math, the English, social studies, other content area, arts, other content areas through those rich projects. Because I know, having seen it, that when we can engage students in work that matters to them, their learning is richer, deeper, and they hold on to it longer. I heard a statistic just last week on some research that was done by an organization called Speak. Is it Speak Up or Speak Out? But anyway, they were saying that prior to the pandemic, 48% of high school students considered themselves to be disengaged from school. Meaning, that wasn't about attendance. It just means that they weren't really participating. And I fear that during the pandemic, things have gotten even lower. And if we're having less than 50% of our students really engaged in the learning experiences, what are we doing? We really need to change this. I believe through rich STEM integration, we can create a learning experience for all students so that each student can find value, that the learning experience will give them skills, experience, and knowledge that will fuel career options and interests and hobbies, beyond school. So I think that's where our challenge lies in redesigning a system that has been so factory modeled into one that allows for that rich creativity and flexibility to meet the unique needs of all of our students.
I could not have said that better myself. I completely agree with you. And I think that emerging from this really scary time in our history, we will find a way to prioritize these things and make sure that that's what's happening. So, Lisa, thank you for that. And so what are you super excited about at the moment?
Well, there are a lot of things I'm really excited about. I'm excited for this summer, our STEM camp. We have a STEM camp where we serve approximately 200 students in grades 4 through 6. Robotics is one of the top areas of interest for students always. Another one, which might be kind of weird to people, is heart dissection. We have local butchers who actually donate hearts, and kids love exploring, like what are the parts of the heart? What does it look like? How does the heart work? That is, even though it's gory and some of them think, oh, when they first engage in it, they absolutely love it. And that's an option. We never force students to do that. I'm also really excited about some projects. I think that work of Fee Morrison on the STEM Ed magazine and the global community that's bringing together, huge. Really appreciate the work that she's doing there to help everybody with that. I'm looking forward also to, there's a 100 Stops series book that I actually worked on with Rick Jetter. In terms of leadership, it's really good. I have my STEM community. There's also a nice leadership community that developed online, and Dr. Rick Jetter is a leader in that community. And he brought together 100 authors to write a book on 100 no-nonsense things that teachers should stop doing. And I wrote a chapter on why we shouldn't use the same lesson plans year after year, and the importance of making connections with our students. So that will be released. Soft release is planned for April, and full release is going to be in May. Additional books are being released around the 100 Stop series for administrators, for parents, and for students. So those will all be coming. I'm trying to think what else. Also really excited, New York State just adopted the computer science and digital fluency standards. I think that's a game changer for STEM education in New York State. We are one of 5 states in the country that included cybersecurity standards, and I was part of the authoring team for those standards. And so we're working on resources now to support computer science integration. And the last thing I'll say that's really exciting to me is the role of esports. Esports, my friend Gerald Solomon, who is the founder of NASEF, describes esports as the Trojan horse of education, meaning that you can use esports as a learning platform, a rich learning platform for content area skills. And it's like project-based learning in a virtual world. So I see a lot coming forward with that. I think there are a lot of reasons to be excited about the future of STEM education. So I'm thrilled to be working in this area. The challenges that I have faced are entirely worth it.
Yeah. And, I think STEM is really agile and can be very nimble when it needs to be, and it can adapt to what the needs are. I agree with you about the esports. I think that it's a game changer, pun intended, about that. I am really excited. I love this idea of this 100 Stops book that you're talking about, and I'll make sure that the link for that's in the show notes for anyone who wants to check that out. And so wow, that is super cool. I can see why you're excited. You're generally very positive anyway, but wow, there's a lot to be excited for.
There's always, so much to learn. There are just so many different approaches and so many different things that you can do within the realm of STEM education. It's just looking at learning from, I guess, a big view rather than a really large perspective on learning, as opposed to a very narrow content area focused perspective.
Sure. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I tell you that you're right on the money. I love it. That is fantastic. Lisa, tell me, what is one book that you would recommend someone drop right now and read?
I actually there are a lot of great books out there, but one that I think is really important as I reflected on my experiences with students with STEM, I really like the book by Jo Boaler on it's called Limitless Mind. In this book, she talks about brain growth, the need for productive struggle, mindset related to learning, multiplicity, meaning allowing for multiple different ways for students to learn things, and that definitely relates to STEM, flexibility and depth, and the need for collaboration. I think what she discusses in that book really hits the heart of what we do in STEM. And she really actually advocates for data science, which I think is an important aspect of STEM learning as well, as we look at our world. I remember looking at the information when we first were seeing the stats come out on COVID cases, thinking about, wow, there are some really rich math lessons here. Maybe not lessons we wanted to be teaching at the time, but really the data science, helping kids understand, all these connections with the information in their world. I think it's so important.
Absolutely. And, so many kids want to be YouTubers or they want to be gamers, and they're paying attention to their analytics, right? They're looking at all of that, which is, something that even 5 years ago wouldn't have even been a blip on the radar. It is now, I have a 9-year-old and 11-year-old, and they talk about other people's stats on their YouTube channels. And they say, well, if they make this much money and they do this and they do that, here's what, and I'm like, I don't remember that ever being discussed at the kitchen table. So that was pretty amazing. So
that data science matters to your children.
Absolutely.
That's really cool.
I completely agree. And so, Lisa, where do you go to get inspiration? I know you've talked a lot about that already, but what specifically do you go to find inspiration?
Big thing is connections. I have one of my colleagues that I work with in STEM ecosystems is Dr. Mary Margaret Small from Clarkson University, and I work with her a lot on a lot of STEM related projects. We interface like having college students serve as mentors for high school students and middle school students and things in some of the projects we've done. And that's been very inspirational. Twitter, I mentioned Twitter a lot, and LinkedIn. I really like connecting with people there. What happens in the world of STEM is you tend to be that lone wolf. I don't know if that's a good phrase to use or not, but you tend to be that one person with this vision or passion in your organization. You might have other people who are affiliated and support it, but to really keep going with the new ideas and the strategy to move forward, those connections beyond your organization, I think, are critical. So I had mentioned the leadership connections, so learning the skills for interacting with people and being influential in that respect are important, but also the actual activities and content area knowledge and tying that all together are important. So both Twitter and LinkedIn are really important to me. I would say LinkedIn is where I kind of geek out a little more. And by that I mean, a lot of people share more in-depth research-based information in the LinkedIn platform, where Twitter is more your quick bursts, like you can see what people are doing. Maybe you'll have a link to something more in-depth, but it's just a lot of really quick sharing that can be that, like I mentioned earlier, a quick boost, a quick idea for an activity, something that might improve something you're already doing. I find so much inspiration coming from there for me. And then the last one that I would mention is those gatherings that, the community of practice gatherings for STEM learning ecosystems. That was where, I kind of felt like I met my people. It's like that's the community having those conversations about working through the challenges and the struggles to help STEM learning happen for kids. So.
Wow. Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. I think that all of those are very valuable. It is great to hear you talking about that. And I think maybe we should change this to be called the Lone Wolves of STEM, because I think that's what we're dealing with here. So, Lisa, you've mentioned we could. Yeah, absolutely. I think that might even be the name. We don't know yet. We'll see. Maybe the name of the episode. So, Lisa, you've mentioned Twitter, you've mentioned LinkedIn and whatnot. How do people get in touch with you specifically if they want to connect with you on one of those platforms or any other platform?
So my Twitter handle is at LJ Blank, and LinkedIn, if you search Lisa Blank, you will find me there. Yes. Yes. I did not write
That's okay.
down.
I've searched for you. It's very easy. You're usually the top one listed. Yes.
But you know what's funny? There is another Lisa Blank. I went to, that.
Isn't that crazy? It's so weird.
I met her at a STEM Ecosystems convening.
It's that. How neat is that? To again, your people. That's fantastic. Yeah. Literally your people. So, Lisa, I could talk to you all day, but I know that you're very busy, and I know that's just the beginning of your day. So, I think we'll wrap it up here. But I would love to follow up with you at some point in time, because this has just been so great to chat with you, and I hope that we'll all be able to get together at some point in person and all meet at some point in time. But who knows? Who knows? We may have to continue. I
call Australia. Yeah. Australia or South Korea. Hey,
let's bring it on. Sounds man. Let's all meet in Hawaii, and then we'll just be halfway. How about that?
That works.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of DesignCast. I'm Jason, your host, and I produced and created this podcast. If you have any input, I would love to hear from you, and I look forward to seeing you again really soon.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.